Hello and welcome to episode 14 of the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast. My name is Tom Luongo. It is Saturday, 10th of June, 2017. All right, I don't know about you, but this has been like the most monumental week I think we've seen in quite a while. So we've got a lot to talk about. I've got a number of charts I want to show to you today, and we should just really get right to it. And I'm going to start with something that's not really on very many people's radar, given what we've seen in the headlines this week between the ECB policy statement, between the British elections, between Jim Comey's testimony on Capitol Hill. The big news, Qatar, right, which we talked about in the last episode. What's going on behind the scenes is that in Syria, the Syrian Arab Army, in the map that I've got up there in red, has effectively now created an encirclement, a cauldron, if you will, around U.S.-backed forces, rebel forces in southern Syria along the Jordanian and Iraqi border. In white is Jordan, and in gray over here is Iraq. And note that we have this situation has occurred in Syria. Now, we've had a number of clashes between the Syrian Arab Army and the U.S.-backed forces along this border near Al-Tanf, which is, I think, in this area right around here. So, Al-Tanf is in here, right? So, the Syrian army is going to close this cauldron off and push the front forward this way, and attempt to take over all of this. There's very little actually going on in this part of the country at this point, because that's where the quote-unquote de-escalation zones that the Russians and the Turks and the Iranians are enforcing while they wipe out what's left of Al-Qaeda effectively in Idlib up here. Okay? And there's a couple of them down here as well. So the issue is becoming very sincerely that the Syrian army and the Russian/Iranian Hezbollah units, that coalition, is going to wind up taking back this entire western half of Syria. And this was part of Plan B on the America's Plan B here, to create a buffer zone between Syria and Iraq and Jordan in order for them to be able to then take a push towards Deir ez-Zor, which is up off the map where my cursor is currently, and then off screen, Raqqa. And the Syrian army, if I had a map for you, I'd show you that they're pushing southeast from Aleppo towards Raqqa, and they've practically reached the Tapka Dam, where they're within a few miles of the Tapka Dam. And Kurdish-backed, or U.S.-backed Kurdish forces, the SDF, in that region. What it's looking like at this point is that there's a number of things, and I've got the first bullet point up here as a possible Russia-U.S. agreement in Syria. And I read an article this morning before I pushed record, which is what they posited, that after a couple of strikebacks by the U.S.-backed forces in the south here against the Syrian army, nothing has occurred since the Russians publicly rebuked the U.S. on this. And both the Russian general who's in charge of operations in Syria and Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov both condemned the attacks. And then from multiple reports that I saw, there has been no conflict since then. And it even looks from observers on the ground that the U.S. is telling their pets down there to back off and to not engage and to allow the Syrian army to gain territory. And if that's the case, then there's two things about that. One, this is very good because this is telling me that the Trump administration and the State Department under Rex Tillerson are finally getting control of the generals who are actually prosecuting the war in Syria. That Trump is getting control of his chain of command, which he did not have at many points, and that this move here by the Syrian army to reach the Iraqi border and the Jordanian border tells us that they're playing for keeps, and they're playing to get the entire country back. Now, Plan B has always been to partition Syria off, the eastern part of the country off, from, say, Raqqa and east of the Euphrates River, in order to get control of the region and create a greater Kurdistan in the northeastern tip of the country, along with northwestern Iraq and eastern Turkey, which is where the Kurds are. And if so, then the Americans are able to then put in a number of bases in that region and point missiles at Russia to the south and Iran, or Russia to the north and Iran to the southeast. And that's a real problem, and that's a non-starter for both Russia and Iran. And that has always been the quote-unquote neocon Plan B, after it was obvious that they were not going to be able to oust Assad from power. Now, the question I have, of course, is where does Trump stand in this, and how much control over the situation does he actually have? Given the number of events that have happened this week that have obvious U.S. deep state fingerprints all over it, from Qatar to, honestly, the British elections and all of it, I'd say that Trump is still under siege in every way. And the good news is that Tillerson came out and said, and told Qatar and told the Saudis basically to back off about isolating Qatar, and that tells you where Trump stands in all of this, that he's not signing off on this obvious aggression. That's an obvious overplay of their hand, the Saudi, in the case of the Saudi Arabians. So it's all crazy, but at least we can see. I'm getting signs here that Trump is actually who he says he is, and the problem still is that the deep state is fighting back in a way that is, in ways that are sincere. And Comey's testimony plays into that. His willingness to fall on his sword to protect Hillary and go after Trump. It's obvious. And Martin Armstrong had a blog this morning saying he's a part of the Gang of Four trying to get rid of Trump. It's very obvious that he is, and he's even willing to commit personal, commit himself personally on that path in order to get Trump impeached, and then hope that the political scene will turn in his favor and he won't face jail time, even though he's absolutely guilty of an unbelievable number of crimes, along with Hillary and everybody else. But the political establishment in Washington wants them protected and Trump neutered. And we'll see what happens. All right. So let's talk about the British elections real quick. Now, I posted an article on Seeking Alpha, which nobody read, about the British elections, and it's probably the most cogent analysis I've seen of the British elections at this point. If I break my hand patting myself on the back, and of course no one cares, and that's the problem, which is that it's going to be bad for the pound in every way. None of this was going to be good for the pound in the end. I mean, ultimately, the pound was overvalued at $1.30. It's going to continue to be overvalued at $1.27. It's going to be overvalued all the way down to $1.10 or even $1.05. We're going to see those levels on the pound. We're also going to see well below parity on the euro. The ECB is trapped. They admitted that this week they can't. They can only bluff about being willing to extend their asset purchase program into infinity and beyond, because they're running out of marketable assets with which to buy. Like the Fed had to eventually end QE3 or QE4 or whatever you want to label it. Because they also ran out of U.S. Treasuries to buy. There were none available. They were statutorily up against their limit in certain maturities. I mean, this was just the reality of the situation, is that you can't continue to purchase assets forever if there's no supply. And at that point, policy has to change, which is where the Fed is right now, which is why they're going to unload U.S. Treasuries off of their balance sheet, because actually there's a rising demand for them right now, because the ECB is trapped, and eventually they're going to have to stop their asset purchase program, and no one has any faith in that debt, with the Italian banks ready to blow over with a stiff wind. Same thing with Greece, same thing with Portugal, same thing with Spain, probably even Ireland. To be honest with you, no one's talking about Ireland, but all they did with Ireland was kick the can down the road. Which brings me to the British election, because Theresa May's hand, the conventional wisdom here is that her hand has been weakened. And in some ways it has been. She's going to have to, in order to get a hard Brexit through, she's going to have to cave on certain social policies. Now, look, not for nothing, everybody's been overplaying their hand in all of this turmoil, all this political turmoil around the world. When you take a step back from the 40,000-foot level, it's pretty obvious that the Saudis overplayed their hand in terms of, well, how much support they thought they got from Trump 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, right? So now they're going after Qatar because Qatar's trying to, weasel out of the GCC and pivot towards Russia and Iran and Turkey. The Tories overplayed their hand with Brexit, thinking with the polls well in their favor that they could, go for, authoritarian crackdown on the internet, free speech, all this other stuff, and go through massive austerity, budget cuts in the whole 9 yards, and Brexit at the same time. Absolute nonsense. Second thing I'm going to say about this is that I honestly believe that Theresa May was ordered to stand down by the U.S. and European deep state in order to allow moron Jeremy Corbyn, and he is a moron Jeremy Corbyn to rise in the polls and have his Bernie Sanders moment and get the young vote out while the unionist vote gets while the deep state misreads how strong the unionist vote is. That was the plan, to put Corbyn in power, scuttle Brexit, strengthen the EU, and destroy British sovereignty. That was the plan. And the snap election, it's obvious to me now that that was the plan of the snap election all along. It didn't happen. It didn't happen because of what I said. The unionist vote was too strong. It would have worked had the Scottish National Party held on to all of their gains they made in the 2015 elections. They didn't. They lost 21 seats, 12 of which to the now hated Tories. The DUP in Northern Ireland, in Ulster, gained 10 seats, had their best electoral result in ever, getting almost 35% of the vote locally. They took 10 seats. And those 10 seats were enough for May to hold on to, put a coalition together, to hold on to a slim majority. And in the end, the coalition government has 2 fewer seats than it had with the Tory outright majority. And it's just enough. Because the thing is that the whole point was that May was going to be in the same position that Marine Le Pen was in. Everybody would gang up on her against her. No one would form a coalition with her. The Lib Dems, they crushed UKIP out of existence because the Tories again overplayed their hand and took on every one of UKIP's talking points, thinking that they were going to get 400 seats in the parliament, and then and trashed UKIP in the process. UKIP didn't help itself, and this is the way the whole thing plays out. But the unionist vote was too strong. The Tories so the Scots overplaying their hand for a second independence referendum, cost the SNP 21 seats. And now that allowed, and the strong unionist vote in Northern Ireland was allowed the Tories to squeak through. Now, whether Theresa May survives this or not is up in the air. It doesn't really matter. But at the end of the day, they've got what they've got. Now, what will happen here is that because the DUP is socially more progressive than the Tories are, they'll see a rollback of some of the austerity measures because they want that. Higher minimum wage, rollback on the pension cuts, those things, which were big Jeremy Corbyn talking points. It's great that I don't work for Newsmax anymore. I can actually call him a moron. It's awesome. I wasn't allowed to previously. So, because he's just a freaking moron. And it's moron. It's awesome. I can get to say it again. Moron. It's just great. Okay. So, it's the same thing with Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is a moron as well. Neither of them are particularly smart men, and both of them are trapped in the 1970s. You can just see it by their wardrobe. So, that's the situation. And it's going to put downward pressure on the pound because there's no way it's not going to. It's going to blow out the budget, and it's going to, but at the same time, May has actually got a stronger hand now because if the Tories want to hold on to what they have, they're going to have to coalesce around this fragile coalition and push for what their core constituency voters want, which is Brexit, and a hard Brexit. And so the EU thinks that they've got a stronger hand now, but they actually don't. And the markets are, misreading all of this. And with the ECB trapped with failure to with failure to consult to prove to anybody that they have any more ammunition, the euro is going to start to reverse. The pound is going to continue to sell off. The yen is going to continue to sell off, and assets are going to start leaking across the pond back to the United States en masse, and we're going to see it. Now, whether we get a sincere move down in U.S. Treasury yields or not is a good question, because they're now technically, I think, overvalued, and so you'll have and with the dollar moving back up, you'll have selling of U.S. Treasuries by foreign central banks in order to defend their currencies, but you'll also have you also have private sector money moving out of European sovereign debt, and probably Japanese sovereign debt as well, in order to preserve their capital. So I think there'll be a fight. I just don't see much. There may be some move now, but it won't be significant. So but as you know, I closed a historical position on a short in the U.S. Treasury market for a little while, because I don't, in a spasm, I can easily see yields dropping 50 basis points. And I just, I don't want to be caught that far offside. I'd rather wait for that to happen, and then we can deploy longer gold, yada, yada, yada. So that's what's going to happen there. It's the same trade. So let's get to the charts. We'll talk about gold, silver, Bitcoin, and I think I got the euro on tap as well. We'll see. All right. So let's talk about gold. I didn't change the frickin' title. Sorry, very, very sorry about that. Gold is not cleared for 1,300. Gold is more likely cleared for 1,200 at this point. This is a bad bar, and it's setting up a high probability move back to this low next week, and we could possibly get a 2-bar reversal on the weekly chart. Gold looked at 1297, saw its shadow, and ran for the hills. It's really as simple as that. Remember, I said the last time we talked that, once we get to 1297, if we break through that, there's a possibility of a move to 1319, which would be a 2-bar reversal on the quarterly chart, which would change the quarterly chart to bullish from bearish, but it's not there. As a matter of fact, it looks like we're going to get a continuation of the bearish trend. Exactly what I've been saying since March in every one of my articles on gold. So it just playing itself out. This rally no longer has very much upward momentum. So we'll see if we get follow through action to the downside next week. If we do, great. Then this is a safe bet to put a short on. If you didn't do so yesterday or the day before, this is a safe bet to put a short on against gold, I think, especially next week with a close below 1261. Okay, and we'll most likely start to see lower prices because the dollar is going to rally from here. All right, same thing. We're getting confirmation of the same thing in silver. We got a push. We didn't even get a push to $18 this week. As a matter of fact, we just got a sell off. So $17 on the low end on silver to gives us a 2-bar reversal on the weekly chart. And that would be a major reversal signal. And that would also give us this kind of widening downtrend channel, which I'm not, actually, no, this is a very well-formed downtrend channel, with a near term or 3-month price target of around 1575. And then possibly lower than that if there's some kind of monetary spasm. So honestly, silver doesn't look good here either. This could, honestly, the bullish read on both of these is that, they both moved a lot. They needed to consolidate recent gains. That's possible. The other possibility is, given the bigger, larger picture, is that the markets are all stretched to the upside and the downside, depending on which market you're talking about, too far. And I firmly believe that the dollar was pushed way too low, with the euro going to $1.13. All right, and there we are. And now we have the euro. And note here, again, we don't have any reversal signals yet, but we do have a very bearish day. And I want you to note this bar here. I want you to know the difference between these two extension patterns, right? So here you've got this move up, and then there's a gap up, and then there's this like a little bit of a consolidation, and then boom, we go higher. So are we going to get, the question here is, are we going to get a repeat of this bar and then push up to 116? Because we've got this kind of pattern here, right? Well, look what happened. Here we got to push higher, and then, I don't remember what happened during this week, but we got this engulfing bar that did not close outside of it. So most likely that week you moved up, broke the previous high, then got a washout, and then got an explosive move up to the upside. And then, but it was set up because you had already seen people break through. A lot of the resistance to this level had already been worked out earlier in the week, so that when the market started to move, it was able to just blow through this level quickly. We didn't get that here. This is an inside bar. There's not an inside bar in the bunch here. There's a bear. This is an engulfing bar here. Yeah, it's a bullish engulfing bar, but it's then followed by an inside bar, and frankly a bearish inside bar. So what I'm telling you is that, and there's gaps on this chart that need to be filled, and. So when you really stop to do some like basic technical analysis of this, the probability is pretty high that we're going to get another move back down towards, we closed at $1.119 yesterday on the euro. There's a very good possibility that we'll see $1.11 next week, and if not lower. And if we get even a break of the low on this bar, that would set up a much lower move. I mean, it may take a couple of weeks for that. The euro could consolidate here for a couple of weeks and then drop, but I don't see a fourth stage explosion higher here. This is getting ugly. This is the classic kind of 1, 2, 3 gets ugly and then collapses, and I think that's where we are in the euro. All right. And then the last thing I want to talk about is Bitcoin. I want to show you that I've been telling you that Bitcoin is in a powerful uptrend when you look at it from a longer term time perspective. I think the best one to look at is the weekly chart. Daily chart is starting to get a little ugly, but you would expect that because it's all over the place. When I talk about capital flight, Bitcoin and Ethereum and all the other cryptocurrencies are telling you quite strongly that these are unmanipulable markets because there's no short selling, there's no derivative contracts, there's none of this financialization horse shit that can get in the way here. So therefore, you're seeing a pure picture of what capital flight looks like in times of crisis, or in Bitcoin's case, in times of pre-crisis. So you can imagine what this is going to look like in times of crisis. Gold can't look this way because gold is managed. We all know it, but it's going to. There's going to be tons of money that move into gold, but Bitcoin and the cryptocurrencies are able to move this far, this fast because they're very small markets relative to the rest of the markets. And if they didn't exist, gold would already be trading at $2,500 an ounce. Because this $105 billion that's sloughed into Bitcoin would have overwhelmed the gold and silver markets at this point. Okay? And I stress to you again that if you don't understand Bitcoin and you don't understand cryptocurrencies, it's time that you learned how to. And I did a Periscope on this last night, so if you don't follow me on Periscope, you should. You can just find me as a username Tom Luongo on Periscope. You can find links to my Periscopes on my Twitter feed, which is TFL1728. If you guys aren't following me there, please do so, so that we can start to coordinate this stuff. I'm probably going to do a video, but there are plenty of them out there on how to get involved in cryptocurrencies. But if you want me to do it, I'll be happy to. Leave a link or a comment in the response to this podcast today, and we'll go over it because it's important. It's imperative now that you understand that part of a Resolute Wealth style protection strategy against chaos is that you have to have cash, you have to have gold, you have to have silver, and you have to have cryptocurrencies. Okay? You just do. Aside from the fact that there's a potential here to make life-changing money. And so I would be remiss as a financial analyst, financial analyst, or market analyst. I would be remiss in telling you that there's not, life-changing money on the table here. I also think there's life-changing money on the table in silver and gold. So, but at the same time, this is another way to protect your cash. And this is also another way to move cash across political boundaries, political borders, in a way that gold and silver no longer are allowed to. They're just not allowed to move the same way. And like most generals, the central banks are fighting the last war. They're still fighting the last war. They're still using the gold market as a means by which to cap the currency in forex and bond markets. They're going to do so for as long as they can, and they'll do so until they can't, and then we'll see it. But we're not there yet. Okay, we're just not there yet in gold and silver, but we're well on our way in the cryptocurrencies. All right, that's what I got for this Saturday. For Stock Shocks and Rocks subscribers, I'll be working on an update on our legacy portfolio from Resolute Wealth this weekend. I'll either get it out this afternoon or tomorrow. And if you are interested in keeping up with the nuances of what's happening in Yemen Both of my articles for Halsey News this week were about this and would do a far better job of me explaining. They do a far better job of explaining my position on what's happening there than for me to just ramble on about it here. So check those things out and have a great weekend, because, nothing says, have a great time than global chaos, right? No, seriously. Enjoy your life, and there's a point that you have to stop worrying about the stuff and just go out and enjoy your life. So you do that. I'll be a shut-in and chronicle it all for you, and we'll talk soon. So thank you. Keep your stick on the ice.